All right.
Uh,
I've started it. Welcome to the Magentelmen podcast.
welcome everyone.
I was just talking about how shiny I am.
And I was just complaining about how he has an assistant and I don't.
Uh, the only problem is my assistant is ignoring me.
uh,
What are you going to do?
well,
So,
once the podcast starts making some money and you can actually pay the assistant, maybe she'll be more attentive.
that's right. Yes, exactly. So, I just recently started using a new PHP Storm color scheme. It's been a big week.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Um, Unfortunately, my week has been a bit more eventful. We did have a rough launch. When was it? Thursday morning.
Oh, no.
I mean, everything went well, but post launch, we started having some performance issues. Haven't kind of ironed those out yet, but
That sucks, man.
and dealing with Magento Cloud, but
Oh, yes. That's always fun.
yes, yes.
And just so everybody knows, we did not plan to wear the same color shirt. That's not, I mean, maybe that'll be a part of our branding at some point. The maroon shirt.
Yeah. The Magentelmen official color.
Yes, exactly. Um, I was actually funny. I was thinking of a story. So back when I got married a few years ago, we had this guy who was supposed to sing at our wedding.
Yeah.
And it turns out like he didn't want to sit in the front of the church because he felt uncomfortable being in front of people. He's very used to singing at the back of the church at this other church. So we kind of got into a little heated thing about it because I had already paid him. And I was like, well, you have to sit in the front. That's where the piano is. That's where the microphones are. How else are you going to sing at our wedding? And he sent me and my wife a text that was for the wrong person. It was a text that was like, these people they want me to come to their wedding and I don't feel comfortable sitting in the front. I don't have anything to wear. And we were just like, whoa, embarrassing.
Oh
But
yeah.
you know, yeah. But I mean it ended up being okay and cool and everything. It just he was like, oh, I'm sorry, that was for the wrong person.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you have any stories about sending texts to the wrong person
Oh.
or not.
Oh,
Maybe you don't.
it's funny how you brought that up, considering I sent you an an embarrassing text message yesterday. So you're just setting me up, huh?
Kind of. Yeah. But you don't have to talk about it. There's no pressure to talk about the accidental text.
I mean, so I mean, I just drove down from Florida. Well, drove up from Florida since I'm in North Carolina. Um, and yeah, I was at my girlfriend's sister's house, and I went to the restroom and ended up finding out too late that there was no toilet paper in there, and I accidentally sent you a text message.
We've all been in that situation. Yeah. But not the
Yeah.
texting part. But
Yeah, it was a bit awkward. I was like, "What?" I did not. But I was like, "Wow, I wonder how he's gonna receive this message, and what like is his wife? Maybe his wife is looking at his phone, wondering why is Steve texting Steve about toilet paper."
no, we were driving and I was like, Steve just texted me he needs toilet paper. And she was like, what? And see, I took it as kind of like you were trying to text somebody like your girlfriend who was at the store. And you were like, pick up some toilet paper while you're there.
I was like,
You
"Yeah,
know?
I hope that's what he thinks." But then when you sent me back that emoji, I was like, "What? He's on to me."
Yeah, my wife, she just was like, no. Because that text would be like, we need toilet paper. Right? It's a
Yeah.
different text than I need toilet paper.
Like right now.
Hmm.
Like immediately. Yeah.
Yes,
So
indeed.
you definitely pictured it correctly. Like your wife was like, yeah, she read that perfectly.
She did. Yes, I had an innocent version that didn't involve you on the toilet. Yes. My version was like, oh, somebody went to the store and he's just like, we're gonna need toilet paper for later. Yeah. I mean, I think
You
I
know,
think everybody has sent that text.
yeah, and I mean, I was like, what would have made it worse is like if you didn't respond, like, and it was just like, I'm just like, wow, like he didn't say anything, and it's just like super awkward. But at least like you responded, and it was just like, oh, okay, cool. Like the moment, like the embarrassment ended pretty quickly versus it's just like no response. Like I'm just wondering what you're thinking on the other side.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I'm glad I could bring a little bit of that embarrassment back, especially for our audience on the very first
Yeah.
Magentelmen podcast.
Yeah, like a good way to introduce ourselves to our audience, right?
Well, okay, so this possibly won't be my introduction to our audience because I was recently on a very famous podcast. Uh, what's his name? The Swift Otter CEO. I want to say Mark Schuss, but that's not right. It's Joseph Maxwell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But Mark is just like everywhere, right? But
Mark is Mark is the man. Yeah,
yeah. But
love both those guys.
yeah.
So I was trying to say like they might have already seen me around.
Yeah,
I'm out
yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, is that episode like already out?
No, so yeah, I mean that episode's not out yet, and actually, um, that podcast that he's doing is for merchants. So it's not like he's not pushing it to his kind of developer audience.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think it's getting a ton of traction yet. I checked his views, and they're not as high as like the views that like because we post our Charlotte Magento 2 shout out to anyone who's seen those videos on YouTube, and we're
Yeah.
getting like I mean one of our videos has like 350 views, which to me is
Yeah.
like whoa.
Yeah, we're like
So
famous. Right? Like
yeah.
PewDiePie, like is gonna like be worried about us in no time. Like, our subscriber base is gonna just blow up.
We'll see. I mean, honestly, when I was talking to him yesterday, because we did do the podcast yesterday,
Yeah.
he is so cool, and I was just like a fangirl. I was just like, dude, this is Joseph Maxwell. Like, I couldn't stop saying, like, dude, it's so good to be here, and I'm a big fan of yours.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to. I've actually, unfortunately, never seen his podcast, but
Nobody
I know.
has. There's like 20 views on each video, dude.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm not as embarrassed.
Mm. No, it's because I don't think he like pushes it like he does his other stuff. This is a kind of a newer project.
He's trying to grow it
Or
organically.
or maybe I'm totally wrong and it's just YouTube that's
Yeah.
getting a few views and he's like killing it on iTunes and I could
Yeah.
totally be wrong. I mean, I haven't checked. He's on all channels, right? Like he goes to Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, all of it.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good.
Um, but I mean, I guess it'd be like gearing your podcast towards merchants would probably be a lot more difficult task, right? Especially since he's more known in the developer space. I mean, I kind of thought about, and for various reasons have tried to make content, not specifically a podcast targeted towards merchants, right? But then it's kind of like, unless you're like one of them, right? One of someone who's actually, I don't know, who owns an e-commerce store or something like that. Maybe, it might be hard to like attract those type of people to your to watch right?
Oh
So,
yeah, definitely.
but
And I mean, I think that was one of the reasons he even had me on at all on that podcast is because I work for a merchant.
yeah, yeah,
Like, no, no, I'm just not like some developer at an agency. I actually
yeah,
work directly for a merchant right
yeah,
now. And I mean, I don't want to come off like I'm saying he doesn't get a lot of views on his podcast. I love Joseph Maxwell. He's the man. I'm just saying, like, I was a little surprised when I checked his YouTube that those videos for that podcast, for the merchant one, they don't have many views on them. I'm guessing probably it's way more popular on like Spotify or
yeah, yeah,
iTunes. We're going to try
yeah.
to get onto all those channels eventually.
That's the plan. And yeah, I mean, for you made a good point earlier about, us being able to garner 350 views off the bat, you know, without the channel, without their not the channel is pretty new. We just started our Magento meetup. So yeah, 350 views. Though, compared to like a major channel, like it's not much, but I mean a brand new channel, that's a lot of that is a lot of views.
And I
Um,
think, though, it might point to, like you were saying, the difference between a merchant focused thing and a
yeah,
developer focused thing.
yeah. I think for sure devs are constantly in search of like, new information, learning how to do their jobs better, that type of thing, versus merchants aren't really I don't know if merchants are necessarily thinking, okay, that I'm gonna go watch a podcast to see if I can how to run my store better. But I'm not a merchant, so maybe I'm not able to put myself in their shoes well enough to see, you know, why it would or wouldn't work.
Yeah. And actually, that is probably a good transition to our topic,
Yeah,
right? Which is imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Um, and one of the kind of ways that I have on my list of like ways to combat it is to constantly be searching that knowledge and
yeah,
going to the next level. And I think probably like you're saying, like a merchant, like a CEO of some retail online e-commerce store, they might be more into like leadership books or
yeah, yeah.
maybe like Tony Robbins or something, right? Like just getting freaking pumped up to pump
Yeah,
everybody else up. And then,
yeah, yeah,
so, but I mean, as an e commerce leader, probably you're going to want to get into, I would say, Joseph Maxwell. Like, come on.
yeah,
He's,
yeah.
he's
I'm sure, eh, and we still haven't seen the Spotify and the iTunes numbers, right? So we
right.
could be talking from
I'm probably wrong. I would, if I had to guess, I mean, I would say he's probably doing great.
Exactly. And then and it could just be that it just hasn't taken off yet, and then 3 months down the road it's like, he's getting tons and tons of views, and it just takes off. So I mean, YouTube
Well,
channels take a while to blow up, right?
yeah. And, like, let's help him out. I'll give him a plug, right? It's called Actionable Insights. Check it out, people. It's
we're gonna give we're gonna give Joseph Maxwell a plug, right? Or us newbies. Okay. I mean, maybe it'll work.
yeah. I just hope
If
he's a very nice guy, so I'm hoping he'll take if he sees this well. And we're not. I love you, man. You're cool. We're cool. So let's talk about imposter syndrome. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So you know what it is, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, me specifically, being much newer to the industry, not just software development, but Magento 2 in general. And I found myself like, because maybe developers that work at larger companies and work like get integrated into bigger teams, right? Maybe they'll have like a huge like buffer, right? A lot of uh, leads, a whole bunch of mentors to lean on. But like my introduction into software development, I kind of just got thrown into the deep end because it was like I started at a very small company. I don't know if I should mention them by name, but I started off as an intern, and I was kind of like given so much responsibility from the get-go and little direction, and it was kind of like, am I equipped? I'm still in school, right? When I got my first internship, and I'm still trying to figure out this, I'm new to Magento, new to working in a production environment, and there's just so much responsibility, no one to really lean on, and there's obviously like there's just so much doubt, like, okay, did they hire the right person? What are the expectations? You know, what if I mess something up? And I think I think just from my experience working at a smaller company, obviously if you work at Google and you're a newly minted CEO or newly minted tech lead, there's that pressure there. But specifically speaking from my experience as a junior developer, um, like fresh into the industry, I found that the amount of responsibility early on created like a space or an environment where like an imposter syndrome just came like, you know, crashing down on me, and I felt like so much pressure. Like, I mean, like the good thing is I didn't give up, and I continued to press forward. And I think that, as long as you're able to not panic and, be honest with yourself and let people know what issues you're having, and constantly seeking to grow, and seeking mentorship or whatever is necessary to get across those hurdles. You can get to a point where it's to a lesser degree, like you experience it to a lesser degree. But I mean, that was like my first experience with it, with imposter syndrome. But I mean, even after those first initial months as a junior dev and getting more familiar with the stack, every time you switch jobs, right? And when you switch jobs, even though you're familiar with the Magento stack at your previous company, right? But then, you move into a different environment, different expectations, different company culture. It sinks in, and I'm experiencing that now because the company that I'm at right now, I've only been there for 3 months, and I'm still trying to navigate the waters, still trying to figure out where I fit in, still trying to figure out, how am I viewed, and am I meeting those expectations on a daily basis? And I'm gonna give you some room to jump in here because I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're all good. I mean, the only thing I would say is that scenario you set up as like the junior developer that you went through, junior developer, and you come in and it's like everything is put on you to do, and they kind of just expect like that's my developer, he does everything. The
Yeah.
only kind of the advice I would give to someone in that situation is, number one, you kind of have to give the person who hired you and the boss, the management team, the kind of responsibility too, that, hey, they hired me to do this job. They knew what I brought to the table. I didn't lie to get
Yeah.
into here.
Yeah.
And, you kind of, what's interesting, I find, and I didn't, when I was a very junior developer, I didn't have this kind of attitude, but I feel like it's sort of helpful to be more of, because it's almost like not giving into the fear, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all have the fear that, well, around the next corner, or maybe even the exact task I have now is the one I can't solve.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's kind of like you have to be the samurai who's not afraid to just get destroyed by this task. And, you know,
Yeah.
you almost just have to sometimes think your way through like, well, what if I don't finish this one? Like, I will spend all night working on it because I'm a hard-headed person. I know I've done that plenty of times. I go home from work, especially as a junior dev. You go
Yeah.
home from work and you work all night, and
Yeah.
you come back the next day kind of like a war vet who feels like, man, I should be able to go home at like 10 if I want, like because I actually solved the thing that everybody was freaking out about, or maybe I didn't, and I do have to work all day again. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of the kind of I guess I I don't know how to phrase this, but when you experience imposter syndrome, you tend to kind of like overwork and like work through the night and lose sleep and that type of thing. um in some instances that motivator, right, that need to kind of like validate my skills to myself and to my coworkers or to leadership, right, it's pushed me, right, to learn quickly, to solve problems under pressure. But right, a lot of times it kind of burns me also. Like I stay up all night and then the problem doesn't get solved, right? And then I go to work the next day and I'm a little burnt out. And then once I calm down and really think through it, or I'm a little bit more relaxed, I just read through the documentation and I'm like, wow, like there's this thing right here that I missed because I was overthinking the entire time. Like I wasn't, I thought like, okay, especially when you first start at a company, you're thinking, hey, I need to solve this problem within X amount of hours, or they're gonna think I'm a fraud, right? They're gonna think, they're gonna be like, wow, we pay this guy how much money, and he can't solve this simple problem. So you're just like panicking, like, oh my God, what's my boss gonna think? What's this person gonna think? Blah
that
blah
is the
blah,
worst when you're
right?
first
Right?
starting,
Yeah, you feel like you need to prove something.
and you kind of do.
When,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's not just the way you feel. Like you basically do in those first couple of weeks or months have to prove that you
Yeah,
know
they
what you're
made the right
doing.
choice,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, and the unfortunate part of that though is that there is a possibility, and that's kind of one of the things I want to touch on is there's sort of a part of this that is luck, right?
Yeah.
Because you could get the unsolvable task in your first week at a new job,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes.
you would just feel so freaking bad. Like I hope that hasn't happened to someone where they're like a junior developer, they come out of boot camp or
Yeah.
college, something, and they just
Uh,
get some crazy like timestamp related task or something, and it's
uh,
like, please solve this,
a
and you're just like,
production, a
I
bug in
can't. Yeah,
production
like,
that can't be reproduced locally.
oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I mean, it's there's always that fear, right? And and especially speaking about the junior dev or the inexperienced dev, right? Even let's not, even if you're not a junior dev, but let's say you haven't been in industry for
it never
10
stops.
years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But at least 5 years down the road, you're like, okay, I've solved X amount of problems. I thought X amount of problems were never like were impossible, but I got through them, right? So in the back of your mind, you're like, man, this one looks kind of crazy, but I thought that a million times already, and I've been able to somehow navigate, right? And I made it here, right? But that initial 6 months, you haven't seen enough problems, right? You're constantly panicking because you're like you don't have that 5 years of experience to look back on and say, well, every time this has happened before, I've been able to get through it somehow, right? Or
Yeah. I
you're
mean,
just, yeah.
I think though there is a kind of a phase where it does morph into a new problem, which is that like you're right. Like as a developer, if 10, 15 years, you're still 100% doing development, then you're right. Like you've developed for long enough that you're basically like, well, whatever problem it is, I'll figure it out eventually, or I'll tell them that, I'll be able to get through this and my career will continue and everything's going to be okay in
Oh.
some way. Right. But there are like, basically what I'm getting at is that as you transition to leading other developers,
Yeah.
it presents a whole new level of um, can I do this? Am I able to lead people?
Yeah.
And there's a whole new level of like imposter syndrome there of like, well, I guess one of the big things that I struggle with, because I've only been doing this for 3 or 4 years, where I actually am leading other team members, is the always wanting to just jump in and do whatever thing myself.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'll just do it, and it's like, no, that's not really the right thing. That doesn't scale, right? We have to somehow teach or lead people to figure out these problems themselves. And it's like, well, can I do that? I don't know. Maybe I can't. Like, um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I, what I've found myself in a unique position where, despite my, you know, I don't have the years of experience that you do. I find myself um, being in a position where I have to lead others, right, or kind of like manage projects and stuff, right. So for me, that's whatever your experience is like 10, 20 fold, right.
right.
Um,
And I think probably a lot of Magento developers get that like as soon as they start. It's like, well, we have these developers overseas too, so
yeah,
we
yeah.
need you to lead them.
um, so just like transitioning to a position of leadership. I mean, each time you switch a job, like I mentioned before, there is that need to validate yourself. Maybe you're a rock star at your previous company, right? But the product was completely different, leadership was completely different, expectations were completely different. Um, and then when it comes to making that transition to leadership, it's kind of like, okay, I know I know what I would do in this situation, right? But am I communicating with these people correctly? And then there's the pressures of dealing with management and answering emails and all of that stuff. But then you're kind of like in between being a technical person, but also being like because when you are a tech lead, right, you're semi project manager, semi communicator, but semi developer, right? Because despite not coding a lot, you do code sometimes, right? Versus, I don't know, like a full on project manager or e-commerce manager, that type of thing, right? There's there's kind of like this battle of, okay, how do I balance the leadership aspects of my job versus the technical aspects of my job. And when I say leadership, it means like how you're kind of in this space where you're beholden to the stakeholders, etc., and you want to impress those people, but then you also have to lead your team and make them happy, and you're kind of like, am I doing the right amount of both? Uh, okay, if I make this person happy, am I disappointing the developers that I lead? If I focus too much on the developers, you know, are the stakeholders gonna, look at me as incompetent, right? And that kind of creates a like some doubt in terms of like, okay, did I move into leadership quick enough? Do I understand what's expected of me? Am I doing a good job on meeting the demands on both ends? That's
Yeah,
kind of something I've struggled with.
I mean, and again, like everything you're talking about there, I feel like we're all kind of not victims of our circumstance, but I'm trying to search for another word that's like we're all just playing the role that we were given, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not, I don't necessarily think, um, you know, out of all the developers in the world or whatever, the one that's so good he should be in leadership necessarily. I mean, I think I'm pretty okay at leadership just because I try hard. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean, I especially like once you start hiring and getting really great people on your team that are overseas, it's almost like, well, man, this guy is so good. I wonder, it's almost like, well, I'm in the US, so I have to lead I have to lead our team, right? And I have to play that kind of on-site role,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
that's what is being asked of me. But I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question. It's kind of like, um, yeah, it's an interesting another kind of avenue of doubt, and like you said, kind of, am I doing this well? And I think probably a lot of the solutions to this is like we're kind of saying is that like as long as you're working towards being better, like you can't. I've noticed if I start looking at other developers or other leaders or whatever it is and saying, man, I want to be like them, or why aren't I as good as them? Then it leads to this kind of thinking where, well, I'm just screwing up. I'm not like X, Y, or Z, so I can't do well. Uh, whereas if you're comparing yourself to yourself last week, then you should, even if you're feeling these uh, um, imposter syndrome, even if it's getting confirmed by the outside world and you're getting fired, whatever it is, right? Like
Yeah.
it's still, are you improving, right? Because nobody woke up, or nobody was born knowing Magento 2. Everybody, Vianney Cop, Joseph Maxwell, Mark Schutz, they all started somewhere and
Yeah.
learned all the way up, right?
Yeah. And to bring that up, right? That is the biggest fear. Um because you know, if you're working hard, um and you're constantly learning, you'll eventually get to the point that, you know, you need to be. The problem is there's always this fear of, well, are they going to give me enough time to get to that point, right? Am I going to lose them before that point, right? Am I going to get fired, right? Because I
Yeah.
can deliver on X project. Um and just to bring it back to like that, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Maybe that pressure will cause you to kind of crumble, and you just get so worried about being fired or not doing the right thing, and you know, you're unable to perform. Or you're just like, well, you know, I'm in this position, I'm going to do the best job, I'm going to be as transparent as possible. And you know, hey, if I do end up getting fired, because that does happen, at
Yeah.
least at least I'll be better, right?
See,
um
now I'm
at the
not,
end of the day.
yeah, I'm not under the impression though that imposter syndrome is necessarily like taking people out. Do you think people are quitting the industry, changing jobs because of this type of thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think people get to a point where they're so in their heads, and they're so worried about, like, you know, well, I wasn't able to meet X deadline, right? And what are people gonna think? That they definitely will quit. I mean, it happens before you even get into the industry. Like,
That's
I
what I
don't
was
know.
gonna say. Like, wouldn't it be like in the boot camp or in the college?
I mean, there's the case where people, for example, they were a developer, they get promoted to lead or manager, and then they step down after X amount of months, right?
Right. You hear
Um,
about that on like Hacker News and stuff,
yeah,
right? Like but they say they were bored or they didn't, and maybe that's just what they're saying.
maybe, yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe. I'm pretty sure someone got into the position, and maybe the first 3 months were kind of rough, and they're like, man, I don't know if I'm ready, if I'm the person to take on this responsibility, and they step down, and maybe just to save face, or whatever motivation they had, they chalked it up to something else. But I think it could happen at any stage. You could be a computer science student, or maybe you're in a boot camp, and you're just like, man, like everyone in my class is so amazing at coding. They've been writing, they've been hacking servers since they were 3 years old, and I'm just learning coding. I'm just learning how to code today. I'll never be like these guys, right? Or
Yeah, and I mean, I
my
guess
project sucks, and they just quit at that point.
one of the sucky parts of this is that it's your livelihood, right? That we're talking about, because it's
Yeah,
like, obviously, if it weren't like I need a job and I have to have this, then I think this imposter syndrome thing would be a lot less. I would have less, uh, seriousness to it, just because it's like you almost get trapped, right? Like where you get this job and now you're like, that's my job. I need the money. And if you go in every day and you feel like, man, I'm not qualified for this, and
yeah.
I'm studying and it's not coming to me, especially if they're being hard on you and they're like, why aren't you
Oh yeah,
picking this up?
that's a really tough position to be in.
Yeah.
I I mean, at that point though, I think it's kind of like if you're new to any position, regardless of your the amount of experience, there's bound to be some bumps in the road. Um, and at some point you have to be able to communicate with the company you're at, right? And say, well, I may know Magento, but your I don't know what modules you have installed, what integrations you've made, or maybe maybe the code base wasn't maintained, um, you know, to a certain standard. It's going to take me some time to be able to be as productive as maybe I sounded great in the interview, right? But then I have not had the chance to work in this environment, right? I performed well at my old company. So if I don't know, I feel like if I got hired and like within a month, like my boss was like cracking the whip and just like, hey, you're not performing and blah blah blah, like, and you didn't get your dev environment up in like 2 hours, then I might think to myself, huh, um, maybe it's me, but you know, companies they have to be a little easygoing in the beginning to at least let you give you an opportunity to grow into the role, to get accustomed, because maybe your technical abilities are up to par, but you just haven't figured out how to navigate the company culture. I don't know, like, it's hard to put it into words, but every company works a little bit differently. Managers have different expectations, different communication styles, and that could be the roadblock. It might not be, how competent you are, but just whether or not, you figured out how the company works, and how to communicate with X manager versus Y manager, right? And we've had our fair share of interesting managers, right?
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
but to sum it up, the company or the environment that you're in can definitely compound the imposter syndrome issue and make it worse than it needs to be. And in that case, maybe it's not worth sticking around to validate yourself. Maybe you need to go to a different company that'll actually give you the opportunity to prove yourself, right? If day
Yeah,
one they're just like, well, we need you to migrate from Magento 1 to Magento 2 in 1 week, it's just like, wait a minute. This is not imposter syndrome. You guys are trying to screw, like, you guys are setting me up to fail.
impossible syndrome.
Exactly.
Yes. I mean, so I agree with what you said, and I think a lot of the things we're saying, like as far as like a solution or a way to combat imposter syndrome, kind of fall into the like easy to say uh, thing, and then you're living it, and it's like it's actually hard to do. But it's I think it's helpful to at least have these uh, ideas in your head, so that once it comes up, you kind of maybe can remember back to like, you know what, as long as I'm better than I was last week, and there's always other jobs out there. For me, I always tell myself, look, if I have to, I'll deliver pizzas. I will pay my rent, and I'm not going to worry that much. I mean, I will. Okay, it's hard to say I'm not going to worry that much because honestly, if I get a problem that I think I could possibly solve, but I'm having trouble solving it, I get obsessed, right?
Yeah.
And I go nuts until I do solve it, eventually, usually. So I shouldn't say I don't care that much, but I always have it in the back of my head like, this does not define me. I
Yeah.
am not Magento 2 developer. Like, I'm a person, you know what I mean? And if I fail at being a developer, that doesn't mean I'm over. Okay, I will survive.
Yeah. We should cue some music here. No, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to think of yourself as, as a work in progress, right?
Right.
Your company has to have some empathy, right?
And work on
Um,
the fundamentals. Always be strong on your fundamentals,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Because
and
if you do that, then the things, all the little things that pile on top, you're going to be better able to solve if you're like really strong at just PHP or just JavaScript, and forget all these frameworks and stuff that are built on top of it and just focus on the low level.
yeah.
I'm just putting that out there as an idea too that might help you with imposter syndrome a little bit.
I mean, for me, it was kind of like, you know, um, I, as- like for me, what I've kind of done to like cope with things like that is just acknowledging to myself and trying to be as transparent to, you know, whoever is the person that, I report to, trying to be as transparent as possible, explaining, why a certain thing can't isn't being done within a certain time frame. And then there's also, in the beginning, like an ecosystem like Magento, uh, like I felt like, well, there aren't as many, like if I wanted to learn Django per se, like Django or Java, there's like tons of tutorials, right, on whatever you want to do in those languages or associated frameworks, right? But with Magento, I kind of found that there's not that much YouTube content,
Ooh.
and then the developer docs can be a little rough. Some topics they explain, pretty well. Um, Other topics, not so much, right? But what I'm getting to is you're not gonna know everything up front, so just at some point you just got to say, okay, this is the problem that I have right now. Let me just kind of slow it down, focus on this single problem, and just kind of find those resources. It took me a while to kind of find the resources to kind of get me over those hurdles, right? But definitely, you know uh find like the Slack channel, the Magento Slack channel has been super helpful as of uh, recent, specifically from Magento Cloud, because all the Magento instances that I've worked on have all been on-prem, right? Where we have direct access to the server, or maybe there's a DevOps or AWS person who kind of runs the show and gives you access, and then you can do whatever you want. But when I got introduced to Magento Cloud, it was kind of like, wait, so we have to submit support tickets, and we only have um, read access to certain files, which is something I wasn't used to. But because I kind of found that resource, the Magento Cloud Slack channel, I've been able to get in touch with other developers that have kind of seen some of the issues that um, that I'm experiencing, kind of just letting you know, well, okay, everyone has reached this point and kind of had to just submit a support ticket and wait for Magento Cloud, right? Versus if you didn't have that information or someone didn't tell you that, you might be thinking, oh, I'm not doing something right.
Yeah. And
Why am I stuck on this problem? When
yes.
it's actually an impossible problem to solve, and you kind of just need to open up a ticket and have Magento Cloud or whoever that third party is handle it, right? But absent of that information, like if you didn't have that information, you're just there beating yourself up, and time's going by, and you're just wondering, like, look, and again, this is a new job, so then I'm like, okay, what are these people gonna think, right? Why, they're gonna be like, well, isn't he a Magento developer? Shouldn't he have solved this problem before, already, right?
Yeah, and then it's like Magento 2's been out for like 2 years or something at that
Exactly.
time. It's just like it. I mean, I think you're definitely hitting on something real and probably a good note to kind of end this on, which is that finding the right resources to learn from, and digging into those is going to be really important. Um, and I know for me, like Mark Chest, Swift Daughter, shout out
Yeah,
to Joseph Maxwell again,
yeah,
and uh, Vinny Cop with Mage2.tv is really super important. Max Pronko on YouTube has helped me out a lot.
yeah.
Um, just it's not like super in your face. Like I came from the Drupal community, and the learning resources were everywhere, and it was like
Yeah.
really high quality, which is coming now. Like the people I just mentioned, they are producing really high quality, good learning content.
Mark Shust is really and I'm gonna purchase a few of his courses, specifically the JavaScript UI component stuff.
Demystified, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's kind of like a pain point for me, and I'm like, for the longest I've just been like, man, there has to be something out there that like explains this well, because the dev
But there wasn't really like there was just go learn Knockout, and then you
try
can
to try to fit it into Magento, right? And
which I mean works. Like I know developers and I've worked on Knockout where it's like you come and look at what's going on in Magento 2 and you're kind of like, oh, okay, I see what they did there.
yeah.
But if you didn't have that context, when you look at it, it's kind of more like, oh, I see there's a lot to learn. There's
Exactly. Exactly.
because they did their own thing too, right? Like it's not just straight Knockout or, you have your mage init and kind of using require along with all of it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm really looking forward to that course too. I don't know if how soon I'm going to be able to buy it. It's $100, so I kind of went ugh when I saw that. But hey, maybe we can get our work to pay for it or something.
Well, I mean, compared to the um Magento U,
Yeah,
like like
they're like,
it's a bargain.
oh yeah. And I don't know. I mean, did you watch any of those when they were free?
Yes, I did, and I think you had said this. You expressed the same thing. I didn't like them that much. I felt like they kind of just like touched on things pretty quickly, and the videos ended with not too much depth. I was expecting for them to like stay on a particular topic for longer and kind of like explain the inner workings of things. Um, but those were the on demand courses, right? But
Yeah.
even, I mean, how did you feel about those? Or
I
maybe it was someone else that I
No,
spoke to
no,
that
you're
had that.
right. So I didn't get a chance when they were free to delve into them again. I was super busy with my personal life at the time, so regrettably, I didn't jump in. But when I did use them a long time ago, um, it was at a time when I think 2.1 had just come out, and it was radically different than 2.0.
Yeah.
So like the folder structure had all changed, and I was looking at those videos, and it was kind of just like wrong. Like you're none of this actually matches up. So there was some frustration there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just as a general rule, I looked at some of them when it was free. It wasn't I don't consider that high quality training material. It's
Exactly.
something. It's very expensive, but at
Yeah.
least it's something, right? Like
Yeah.
whereas before other than that, there's not like a ton of Mark Schuss or um, obviously like the ones we already mentioned, are who produce the good training materials as far as I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Mark Schuss is gonna be like the kind of uh, savior when it comes to creating that quality documentation in the Magento space. Definitely looking forward to that course. And it's
Yeah,
different.
I,
Yeah.
I know Max Bronco just came out with one too. He has what's it called? I think it's obviously it's not M Academy. Here, let's see. Magento course. I'll just look it up real quick. So it is magemastery.net. And they have it's like where you train for a certificate, but I feel like it's well, I don't know. Also, I mean, the big one I want to do right now is Joseph Maxwell at Swift made the course for associate developer studying free. So that's a big thing
Yeah.
because I think it was like a couple $100 to join that course before. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's like such an awesome thing to do, like a gift to the Magento community, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in like we kind of joined early, right? So we kind of we had to go through uh some rough times, but like 5, maybe 2, 3 years from now, definitely 5 years from now, there's going to be a lot of uh documentation and resources out there. And then for the new Magento generation, it'll be a lot easier. And they'll be like, wait, you guys learned Magento like that?
Yeah.
How did you survive?
Yeah. I
That's
mean, honestly, I think, and this is my new theory that I just came up with recently, because I was gonna study and get the JavaScript engineer certificate,
yeah,
but I think probably for front end devs anyway, I almost would suggest getting the associate certificate, just because I think the front end is going to change so drastically in the next 5 years
yeah,
that studying the current front end and like becoming some expert at it is really only going to last you a few years as like a career thing. Whereas if you have your associate's developer certificate and then you're studying for pro or whatever, that back end part is going to stay as
yeah,
Magento
yeah,
for a while. And it's almost like my new theory of what I'm going to do is like I'm going to take the associates developer material from Joseph Maxwell, try to get that certificate, and then probably start studying headless Vue or React because that's where it's all going. Why keep becoming some expert at Magento's front end, right? Like it's not going to be here forever. Going,
we're we're like losing light here, at least on my side.
it's all good.
Um, but yeah, before we end, like how much do you study? Like how often?
I mean, at least a couple hours a week. I like to. I mean, I keep up like with my newsletters on front end and stuff. Whatever interesting things come out of those. And then yeah, I'm trying to dedicate at least an hour or two per week to study. What about you?
About the same. Um, what my biggest struggle though is trying to figure out um, what to study, because at least on the back end side, a lot of times I have tasks that are more DevOps related for a particular week. So like I'm studying like things like Nginx or Fastly, that type of thing. And I'm not even looking at Magento code for that week, right? Because there's something wrong with the server. Maybe redirects aren't working as expected. Maybe we have some performance issues. So then it's like, maybe I'll go a while without actually touching the dev docs. And then I'm like, okay, great. I'm becoming an expert at Fastly or Docker, right? But then it's like next week I have all Magento related stuff, right? And then that's kind of like the soup du jour, as they say, right? It's
What's the
kind of
soup of
like,
the day?
yeah, it's kind of like what I never really know what I should prioritize on studying. Um, and being newer to the space, I definitely have a lot more ground to cover. I'm sure you've seen a lot more stuff, a lot more issues, handle a lot more features than I have. So then I have to consult the documentation or do a lot more research than you do.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I've always been like, uh, what's the most popular thing? That's what I
yeah,
like to try to study.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, it's
But I think I didn't answer the question. So how much do I study? It's about, I would say I try to do about 1 to 2 hours a day. Sometimes on the weekends, if I'm working on if I've seen a particular issue come up a lot, I might dedicate like 4 hours on a Saturday to that particular topic just to kind of um, like immerse myself in that thing. So then it's not like, okay, I learned enough to solve this problem, but then it's going to come up 6 months down the road and I'm going to be like, what, how did I do that thing in Nginx again? Or how did I solve this problem that we were having with our uh, admin sitemap or something like that? It's just, it varies, but usually around 1 to 2 hours a day, and then like uh, a solid block of time on the weekend.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's goals right there, man. I gotta get into that because what happens to me too is that like I'll do that and then I'll be like, I should just take on a side project. And that's what I'll do some side projects instead, and I'll just be like, I should be making money. I might just
Oh, so you're like not Magento related?
no, it might be Magento related or just commerce related. Like maybe it's a Shopify something or else, or I mean, usually it is Magento related, but I just I'll get into the zone of like I've been studying, let's say, an hour a day for a couple of weeks, and then I just get the itch. I'm like, you know what I should do at this time? Make money, you know. And then by the time I'm done with whatever side project, I'm like, I'm good for a while. So that's just kind of where I am right now. Like I'm sure I'll get back on the horse and get
No,
more studying in.
no, I mean, like it's like it's like while working on the project, it's kind of like studying, or maybe not studying, but like putting your studying to practice. It's not a waste of time. Obviously, while doing that, you're still having to do research. So I wouldn't beat myself up like just because
Well,
I'm not.
no, I'm not. I mean, the big thing though for all front end devs, I think, is there's a big looming shadow over our career in Magento,
Yeah,
and it's headless. Like we have to get ready. We got to know uh, React or Vue or something
yeah,
soon. Like we,
yeah,
none of us Magento front end devs who are making good money because Magento pays well, right?
yeah,
Um, can be comfortable right now. We got to be sort of itchy and freaking out a little bit because
yeah.
however long. I mean, there will be merchants that stay on Magento 2 with their current front end for 5 or 10 more years. I'll bet.
Mhm.
But there's going to be most of the opportunity in the next 5 years, I think, is going to shift for front end developers to being headless and having React review
Yeah,
job.
kind of kind of start working on some ways. Like once that happens, then imposter syndrome comes back again, right?
Dude, yes,
Right, you're just like,
absolutely.
wait, I was comfortable and doing things the old way, and now
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah, I mean, you have all your certificates. Like a front end dev that does Magento and is a super expert doesn't need to know React or Vue or anything right now. I mean, you would think if you're a front end dev, you kind of at least have an idea of what's going on in those worlds. But you know, if you don't and you've been doing Magento for a long time, I think the people who aren't that worried like that are people who've worked at agencies, right? Because the agency people have to build different kinds of projects
Yeah,
quite a bit. So you kind of get like, oh, well, now we're going to do this Shopify or it's an Epi server or big commerce headless. Like you might have already done a headless
yeah.
thing. Um, but, and I
Sound
think also what's going to be interesting is that basically what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is there's going to be a big influx of developers who are now willing to work on Magento front end where they've been doing React or Vue or something for the last 5 or 10 years. And they're like, oh, well, I'll work on that project. So you're going to start seeing a lot more competition, a lot more, uh, maybe not
ah
such high salaries for
yeah, yeah.
front end
Um
devs. Because I think React people will make like, uh, an expert front end React developer that's not working at Facebook, obviously, I think would make like 70 or 80,000. Whereas that same developer, if they had specialized in Magento, would probably be up 100, 110. You know,
yeah, yeah. I mean, and imagine that Magento developer making 130K, being in that position where now they're in competition with those React developers. That's a and in your scenario where the management is just coming down on you, like, man, we could just hire a developer that already knows this stuff, right? You don't want to be in that position, so people need to heed your warning, right?
heed the
It's
warning. Yeah,
they,
I think obviously there's the like maintenance knowledge of Magento 2 front end, whatever knowledge you have, like don't lose it. Keep it up, keep going. But also, if you're studying, I would say uh, it's time to start looking at something headless. The problem with that too is like you're gonna bifurcate, right? Like if you study React headless and you become some expert, you won't be able to work on most of the Vue stores probably.
yeah.
So you kind of have to just study headless, right? Like what is a headless app? Does it matter if it's built with Vue or React? Like I'll learn the specifics when I get in there, but I need to know my JavaScript super duper well, people. Like learn your JavaScript. Take the hard parts course. Take the what is it? Front end masters courses. They're
you,
really good and it covers all of that stuff. So
you know
that's
what
what
you
I'm
sound like? Those people that are like, yeah, the economy's gonna crash.
doing.
The world's gonna end, guys. You need to get
Yeah.
your
Get your giant bottles of water, rice in the basement. Get a basement.
exactly. Get canned foods. Build your bunker. Buy guns. The government's gonna take your guns
Telling you,
away.
man. Telling you. Yes. All right. Well, that's a great note to end on. Is some sort of like an apocalyptic. Uh,
Yeah.
it's been great, man. I think it's been a great first podcast. Shout out to Swift Otter. I love you guys. And Joseph Maxwell's the man. Mark Shest, Steve Bien-Aime,
Bien-Aime.
Bien-Aime. The friend of my friend is my
Yeah.
Bien-Aime.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we did pretty good for the first time. Maybe some rambling on my part. I don't know.
No,
Let's see
no,
how
no, no. I won't hear of it.
let's see how the audience reacts, and yeah,
Yeah, smash
let,
that like button. hit subscribe. I should have said this stuff at the beginning. No one's gonna actually listen to all the way at the end. Do you think?
We should just cut this part and put it at the beginning.
There you go. Smash that like button. Hit subscribe.
Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Gentlemen. Yeah. Well, I have to make the logo, and obviously it's something to do with maroon shirts. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's fate, you know.
I think so.
Like how did this just happen like this?
I don't know. Okay, man. It's been great talking. We'll see you guys next time.
Like